Hey, everyone. Welcome to Unique Ways with Thomas Gerard, an audio podcast. Got a really great guest on today. She's best known as the designer of the Google logo. Her practice is described as we are passionate about problem solving through creative collaboration. We ask questions, share and develop stories, go wide and deep, and magic happens. Please join me in welcoming Ruth Kedar. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Hi.
Hi. Are you ready for 20 questions?
As ready as I'll be.
Okay, question one. Tell me a little bit more about yourself. What do you do?
Well, from your intro, professionally, I've been a designer for most of my career. I was born in Brazil, born and raised. My parents moved to Israel when I was 16. And so my life kind of turned upside down. I went on to finish high school and applied for the School of Architecture and Town Planning at the Israeli Institute of Technology, graduated from architecture, although during my studies it became really clear that I was more interested in design, generally speaking, than in architecture. And then after that, I started my own business. We can dig in a little bit more if it's interesting. Actually creating information systems, or what I like to call then translating architectural big public uh, buildings and systems to the user. This was before user interface was a thing or usability was a thing, but that's what I did for 5 years. And then I thought that having been formed in architecture and yet practicing in design in a field that was not known in Israel, that I really needed to go back to school. And so I applied for, I was looking for an interdisciplinary program, and there were two choices, either MIT in Boston or Stanford University in California. And California won. And so I found myself at Stanford doing my graduate studies in design, again, taking full advantage of all that was being offered at the time, as well as delving back into art, which always been a passion and a love of mine. And then upon graduation, because of my master thesis, which I think that perhaps the thread of this whole conversation is how my life has not progressed linearly, which I am really very glad about. But when I came to Stanford, my idea was to continue and deepen my interest, which was information graphics. However, for my master thesis, I ended up doing a full year study on playing cards and ended up designing a series of decks for the presentation. And upon graduation, my one of my um, mentors at the time, David Kelly, who is founded the School of Design at Stanford and was the founder of IDEO, thought that I should be connected with Adobe because they were developing PostScript and it would be interesting for me to talk to them. And I met with Russ Brown at Adobe, and he told me that they were developing this new software called Adobe Illustrator. They were about to launch it, and they were going to launch it in Las Vegas. And wouldn't it be great for me to design a playing card, a deck using Adobe Illustrator?
Mm.
And so, again, anecdotally, I asked him, you know, what is the software? What does it do? What are the issues that you have with it? And one of the things that became really clear from our conversation is that the program had a very high barrier of entry. Users could not use it. Adobe Illustrator at the time was not the Adobe Illustrator that we know today. It was all lines only, no color. You had to envision what the final product would look like. So designers who were not perhaps technologically inclined really didn't want to use the software. And similarly to what's happening today, a big fear from creatives that using a computer software would stifle their creativity and everything was going to look exactly the same. Based on that conversation, I said, well, one of the great things about a playing card deck is it has four suits. And instead of my designing the whole deck, why don't we have four different designers coming in? Each will be responsible for a suit. And then we can actually showcase the fact that our own creativity, our own styles are not being diminished. If anything, we might find new ways of expression. And so that's what we did. And we introduced the Adobe Deck at Comdex, which was a huge success. And kind of the rest is history. So I was invited to actually come and work at Adobe as an art director, which I did for a few years. And then Stanford called asking me to come back and teach design, which I found very interesting because I still thought that I have a lot to learn and I don't know anything and I should not be asked to teach, but it was a great experience. I actually found kind of a second or a third or a fourth vocation and was really interested in collaborating with students and helping them grow. And it was at Stanford that I was introduced, actually, Stanford and martial arts, which I took later in life. Through a acquaintance friend during Aikido practice, which is Japanese martial arts. He suggested I get in touch or that perhaps the people at Google, who was just formed by Larry Page and Sergey Brin, and have a conversation because they were forming this new company and they were looking for somebody to design their logo. And that's how that happened. So at the same time that I was at Stanford, I continued working in my own practice, and I had been doing those two things in tandem, continue to practice, and that brings us more or less to where we are today.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, maybe a note for the audience, which is kind of related. If you're interested in other big 2025 episodes, check out the episode with industrial designer Kareem Rashid. He was a great guest as well. So number two, what's a key piece of knowledge that makes you different?
Well, I think that I'm really interested in going broad and going deep. My interests are not only uh, which by itself is of interest. I am really interested in what makes people move in the world. I am really interested in again, going what I call the rabbit holes. Every time I find some interesting article or I hear something or I see something, I go and I investigate. And that really broadens my understanding and broadens my toolkit, if you will. And so it makes it for really interesting conversations. I'm always more interested in the questions than necessarily the perfect solution, but really understanding the nuances, understanding what it is that makes people tick, what are the problems that they need solving. I think that based on necessity, perhaps, or maybe is a kind of inherent talent, I've always been a keen observer and a very good listener, uh, which today, since I am talking no end, it's kind of the opposite of what I prefer to do. But I'm really interested in conversations. I'm interested in learning. And I think that those conversations, because I bring in a lot of different aspects, allows me to ask interesting and deep and poignant and perhaps different points of view from the people that I collaborate with.
Great. Okay, so number three, why this of all things? Why do you do what you do?
Well, it's again interesting. I was born into a very eclectic family, people who did many different things. My mother, as an example, was a mathematician, but she was also an artist, and I was exposed very early on to, again, very heated conversations and many, many different topics was introduced. I was born in Brazil, which luckily for me, it's an incredibly rich culture, music and architecture and, language and diversity and foods and sounds and colors and everything that you can imagine. And so very early on, I became really interesting in everything around me, and again exposed because of my parents' interests in the arts. And my mother would mention once in a while that her dream was to become an architect. And I think the trip that we did when I was about maybe 11 or 12 years old to Brasilia, which was a newly minted capital of Brazil, designed by the Brazilian architect Oscar Niemeyer. It was this whole idea of an architect being able to create a city. I was introduced then into what is urbanist design, and it really left a very indelible mark in me. At the same time, we visit Europe and, Greece and Rome and all of the different sites of antiquity and the history and architecture all kind of melded together. And I thought, this is what it is that I want to do. And so as I said before, I enrolled in architecture school. And one of the things that I was kind of really interested in, I've always been very interested in math and technologies and art on the other side, and visual arts or all different kinds, that how many systems were involved, how many things that were not perhaps the first things that come to mind when you visit a site, when you encounter any product or architecture building, that there are many things that are kind of integrated that make it work, organisms, very complex organisms. And I was really, really interested in that. And at that point, I've also, because I'm really avid reader and I really wanted to expand beyond what I was being taught at the time, I came across the books from Graphis Press and, got really interested in the Basel School of Design and was really considering whether or not I could go into design, kind of abandon my architecture studies and go in design instead. But what was offered in Israel at the time, it was almost like a trade school. And I felt that it would really be good for me to finish the architecture studies so that I could actually get a much broader education. And upon finishing my studies and graduating, I went looking for architects. At that point, I had in my hands a copy of the book Archigraphia by Graphis Press, which dealt with information systems in architecture. And I tried to interest the architects at the time that this is what I would be interested in doing, kind of translating their visions for the public use so that if you go to airport, you can figure out where your gate is or where your bags are, where the restroom is, etc. And they were not interested. And so I went to graphic designers, studios, and they told me they couldn't hire me because I was overqualified. So one of the things that I don't like hearing is no. So I decided, okay, I am going to start something on my own. And I heard that at Israel there was a contractor. There was the biggest private contractor in Israel. He was doing a lot of different projects. That he was an ideator. He thought out of the box. And I tried for months to get a meeting with him. And after eating a lot of humble pie, I finally got one. And I came, and the only thing I had was the archaeography book. And I said, I want to do this. And you don't know me. I'm very small. I looked very young. And his question was, did you finish high school? And I said, no, I have a degree in architecture. I can do this. And he said, go ahead and I want you to do the signage for all of my warehouses. And so I did. And I started the practice of designing information systems for all of the major public buildings in Israel, and I did that for 5 years. So I think in your intro, you kind of hit the point that's really important to me. I've always been a problem solver, and when I encounter one, and if it is complex, then I want to solve that. I'm also really interested in languages. I speak quite a few of them, perhaps not as many as you do, but for me, visual. Uh, the visual graphics or the visual arts are another language, is another way of translating complex problems into solutions.
Great. So four is a question that some people struggle with. The question is, what does your future look like?
I think a lot of people struggle with this for different reasons. I have absolutely no idea what my future looks like, and I really like to be surprised. I hope that I can surprise myself and do things that my imagination is limited on one hand by where I've been and the sum of my experiences, and it broadens each time by each day and each minute that I into the future. So it will broaden my imagination. So that's what I hope for, that it's a never-ending process.
Great. Five we say is unique to this show. The question is, let's talk about location. How does the notion of place play into what you do?
Uh, the notion of place is integral to my being. Again, I was born and raised in Brazil. I lived my formative years in Israel, and then the lion's share of my life here in the United States. I think that my surroundings, the culture, the people, the language, the nuance of the place is something that I am very attuned to and excited by. So it is incredibly important to me. And it's also really important not only what the place represents kind of for itself, but what its place in the bigger places in which it inhabits or perhaps should inhabit, right? So I think that that is really important to me, this understanding and this seek for knowledge and wider understanding of what the place means.
Great. Six, if you had to start from the beginning, what advice would you give your former younger self?
This is a question I'm asked often,
Hmm.
and I want to say a couple of things. One, I think that in many ways, I go back to the young person that I was, and I try to keep her in mind because she was fearless. And I think this is one of the things as you grow older and perhaps you settle or you in certain aspects of your life you choose the safe option, that this fearlessness that I had as a young person, as a young adult, is something that I need to continue reminded of. So that's number one. Number two, I think that many times we say, oh, I wish I knew this sooner. But I really believe that you need to be open in order to learn, to absorb, and to take it in and implement something. So just knowing something, I knew a lot of things, but I have absolutely no idea what to do with them because I was not ready. You need to be ready for things. I'm a very, very big fan of serendipity, not as something that kind of just happens to you, but it's something that happens to you because A, you are open to it so you can see it. And B, you have the tools to be able to grasp the importance of what it is. So maybe that doesn't answer your question necessarily, but that's the way I kind of look at it.
Well, that's great. Seven, what's a day in your life like?
So I wake up unless I have meetings. Whenever I do, I am kind of a dichotomy. On one hand, I'm incredibly productive in the morning. On the other hand, I think by nature I am a night owl, and so I go to bed really, really, really late. I start my day by doing the puzzles in the New York Times online and doing solitaire games by reading the news. In both, in the US and abroad. As I said, I'm really interested in what's happening in the world, kind of larger scale. So after I do all of that, and if I haven't gone by doing those things into, the proverbial rabbit hole in which I suddenly am looking and learning all kinds of things, I will then, do the work. These days, I am doing a lot less of and do a lot more or dedicate a lot more time to art. I exercise, meet up with people, go about life, etc. That's the day.
Great. Eight is about lifelong learning as a popular topic. How do you stay up to date?
Again, I'm a citizen of the world. I am curious. I'm interested. I read. I listen to podcasts. Again, eclectic taste in that, and I'm really interested in hearing different voices, and so that I can again observe, listen, and get better at understanding the nuances, the complexities. I'm really interested in everything, pretty much anything that I see, things that happen, again, serendipitously or part of, my professional journey. They're all opportunities for learning and to grow. I am very indiscriminate when it comes to learning anything and everything.
Great. Nine, you spoke a bit about tools. Do you use both digital and analog tools?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been, as I said before, I've been really interested in technology. When I was doing my studies in architecture, I actually took a lot of computer programming courses at the time. These are the times of punching cards and, you know, putting together coding something and then going and 2 days later to see what came what came out of them. But that was really interesting to me. And I purchased the first Macintosh in 1984. And I used it quite a bit, even though we didn't have a hard drive, had a 128K of memory and the first full, not even full paint, I think it was matte paint at the time, to do all of my master projects in playing cards. I did a lot of experimentation with that, pushing the envelope. And again, when I started working at Adobe, one of the things that I did quite a bit was actually work together with engineers and trying to develop the software and keep telling the engineers this is not a bug, this is a feature, and pushing the envelope. So this play with technology and being up to date has always been something that has been part of my DNA, I guess. And so, as I've been really blessed to be born in a time in which all of these incredible technological advances have been happening, and lucky to be here in Silicon Valley again when all of these things were being developed. So I've always been on top of it, and I continue to be on top of it and what's happening all around. At the same time, I think that you're saying, digital is the thing. However, I really love the analog aspect of things. I love to touch and to feel and to smell, and that's one of the um, great joys of going back to art and actually doing something with that involve all of my senses.
Great. Halfway number 10. How do you deal with work life or life work balance?
I don't know. For me, they're all one and the same, although I think that for me, the biggest challenge has always been um, being present. I came to the States to do my graduate work when I already had two children, and we needed to integrate them with new language, which is something that I was familiar with, being also uprooted, although much, much later in life. And so, dealing with all of those things, you were being pushed and pulled, and you want to be available and present, and all of those things. And in the olden days, and perhaps again, I've been lucky in that we had less distractions, meaning that when we were at work, we were work, when we were home, we were home. But yes, always that feeling that, and maybe also because I'm a mother, that I had to somehow split my brain in a million and my heart in different, million different pieces so that I could be of service in a lot of different fronts. And I think that that is a challenge every day. Some days I'm much better at that, and some days not so great.
Okay. And if you weren't doing what you do now, what might you be doing?
My first love was, before I started thinking about architecture, being in a family in which a lot of heated discussions and a lot of different points of view, and sometimes there was no way in which to kind of align or kind of keep the peace, if you will. I was an only child surrounded by adults all of my early years. I really thought that I wanted to become a diplomat. This is what I wanted to do. I didn't know exactly what it was, but I heard somebody talking about it, in which you bring parties together and you find common ground, and that sounded something wonderful to do. So perhaps that would be, and again, taking advantage of the tools that I have today, perhaps I could be useful. In this world of ours. And on the other hand, I've always loved animals, and I think working with animals would be pretty awesome.
Great. And 12, what would you not like to do with your career?
There's certain things that you look at and you go like, oh, I wouldn't want to do that. But from my experience, I think that every work is worthwhile if it can bring value. And my life has taken a lot of turns, and there were times in which I needed to start from scratch. And uh, I went into industries where I did not have a lot of experience, and perhaps the jobs that I took, somebody would say they were beneath me, but they have been really invaluable for both my personal growth and for my professional growth. So these days, I try not to turn my nose on anything. I am open to whatever comes my way. It might not be necessarily right for the moment, and I might say no to it, but not because of what it is, but it's because at the moment it does not serve.
Great. And how about a favorite word, quote, or sentence?
So I do not have favorites. Things move me in different ways depending on context and the situation. But perhaps a truism has been for me that life happens when you're busy making other plans. So I like to remember that when things don't necessarily go as planned.
Great. And 14 uses favorite, but the question is, what is your least favorite word, quote, or sentence?
So again, if I were to think about it, it's both my something that I can't stand. Here I is using the word can't when it's directed at me. You cannot do something in the sense that you're not capable, you're not able, it's to this or it's to that. And so I don't like to hear it. However, it's always been a great catalyst for me into doing. First I heard that you cannot arrive in Israel at 16 and think that you're going to be accepted in architecture school. You don't have the language. You're not going to be able to do it. You're not going to get in. Well, I did. You cannot do this. You cannot do that. You cannot, do what you love. When I finished architecture school, I found a way to do it. So, in many ways, the word can't, which I hate hearing, is a great motivator for me to actually go and figure it out.
Great. And you're choosing one word to describe yourself. What word do you choose?
Multi-potentialite.
What keeps you up at night?
The world keeps me at night. I worry what kind of world we're leaving to our children. I worry whether they're going to have the tools, or we as a whole, as the world, we're going to have the tools to uh, remain humans and retain the value of humanity. So that really keeps me up at night.
How about a dream you're chasing?
So at this point in my life, I mean, personally, I think the dream I'm chasing is becoming an artist, in the sense that letting go of the ego or the need to make this into a money-making thing, but really as an artist in the sense of being able to fully express and enjoy the process and continue experimenting without uh, letting me be an impediment to that. So that's kind of personally. And again, more to the point of the previous question, I think the dream I'm chasing is that we will be a kinder world.
Hmm. Last few here. What inspires you?
Everything inspires me. Things, I find it really interesting that, apropos art, that when I create something, I look at it, and again, the critic comes in and says, this is not good or not good enough, and I let it go and I go do something else. But very often I come back to things and I look at them, and suddenly they are really points of inspiration. So again, discards can be inspiring. Things that you encounter, people that you encounter, things that you see. Pretty much, I try to find, and I do find inspiration in everything from the mundane to the sublime.
19. Any advice you'd like to share?
So if we go back to both professionally and personally, I think it's really important for us to understand that critique and criticism uh, are not the same thing,
Mm.
right? Uh, Something that you have done. And perhaps, again, in terms of mindset, if you can look at something that comes back to you as a result of something that you did or something that you said or something that you expressed, that instead of criticism, you take it as a critique, then a critique is not personal, is a reflection of something that you had done. And it's again, if you are open to it, is an opportunity to growth, right? The other hand, because it is something that you have done, you can put a little bit of distance because the person who did, which it was you, but it's the past you who has done, expressed, or created something, is no longer the you that you are now. So you can put a little bit of distance there to be open to what it is that is being said, and you can take it maybe a little bit less um, personally, and be able to get the kernels um, in order to grow. And again, bringing an experience I had as a professor, I was always really interested that when we had critique days in which students brought in their work, whether in progress or their finished work, and it was always interesting that the person that was being critiqued um, very seldom took any of it in. It was they were mostly so defensive that they were not opened to what was being said to them. And conversely, they really learned a ton about what was being said to others, right? So the value here was that you could take in when the critique was directed at somebody else. So maybe this is something that we need to kind of sit with a little bit and see how we can be better listeners from when critique is directed at us.
Perfect. And finally, number 20. How can our listeners keep tabs on you, and what's our call to action?
Well, you can, check, all of the socials, Kedar Designs, or if you're interested in the design work that I did or that I do, or the talks, or some of my ideas. If you're interested in the art side of things, you can check Ruth Kedar Art or ruthkedar.com. Facebook and all of those things. Read articles if you're interested in some of the things that I've done. And the call to action is not necessarily just for me, the things that I would like you to do. I am really interested if you do choose to go into any of those. I would love to hear what you think. If you have questions, I'm always available, and I read them and I try to be really thoughtful in my responses. It might take a little bit of time, but you'll hear back from me.
Okay, thanks so much. Such a privilege to have you on today.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. Thank you so much.